but for bushcraft purposes, particularly where we're carving wood to make traps, spoons, various other items, we generally need a knife that's slightly larger and more robust than a small folding knife. And that's what we're going to look at first. Knife craft, followed by saw craft. So, what's a typical bushcraft knife? Well, in the UK it tends to be a knife like this. It's a medium-sized knife with a blade of approximately 4 inches. The features of this knife, and the features that you should be looking for in most bushcraft or most good knives for bushcraft usage, are as follows. First and foremost, the tool itself is made from a carbon steel. Now, in the old days we used to say go for a carbon steel over a stainless steel because of cheap Japanese imports. Today that's not necessarily the case. One thing you will find, however, is that most hand manufacturers tend to use carbon steel over all other types of steel because it's cheaper and easier for them to process. As such, they can produce a good quality knife with a material that's much easier for them to use. Okay? But if you go to a well-known manufacturer, say it's Mora in Sweden, their stainless steel knives are just as good. The steel itself is just as good as most carbon steels used by hand makers. We're looking for a knife then that has a blade which is approximately the size of the width of our palm, and again a handle which is the same size. This is for obvious reasons. Obviously the handle's got to fit in our hand safely, but with the blade your body grows in proportion to itself. If the blade is the size of the palm of your hand, your eye-hand coordination is such that you can manipulate the blade. The grip of the handle as well should be oval or lozenge shape. We don't want anything really round or anything too square. If we're using the knife for a long period of time, we're going to risk fatiguing our fingers, and if we get fatiguing our fingers, there's a risk of slippage, a risk of cutting ourselves, and we want to minimise the risk of any damage to ourselves. The blade shape itself, generally speaking, these days, a spear point or a drop point type blade like this is the most common. Okay? Avoid blades with false back edges, clip points or saws. They can be useful on occasions, but generally speaking they're more survival or gimmicky knives or designed as fighting knives. We're after a knife which purely is designed to give us a good cutting edge so we can carve wood. There's two options with what we call the tang. We can either go for a full tang, where the tang goes all the way through the handle, or, which is more common on Scandinavian knives, which we'll look at in a minute, a stick tang. Either or, they make no difference. They both have their pros and cons. A full tang adds weight to the knife. A stick tang means that if we break the handle for whatever reason, in the field it's quite easy to replace the handle just by cutting up a stick, sticking it onto the tang and producing a handle. So they both have pros and cons. Another common type of bushcraft knife is this type of knife. This is the Mora knife, classically from Sweden. The knife itself comes with all the features that we looked at in the more expensive handmade knife, but a fraction of the price. These knives are fantastic. Most beginners learn with these knives. I learnt with a knife similar to this, and some bushcraft experts with far more experience than I still prefer these knives. For example, Mora Knife, he still prefers to use a common basic Mora knife to any other knife. The features are still the same. We've got a high carbon blade. Here we've got a slight false edge, which again, as I was mentioning earlier, it's not something that's ideal, but in this type of knife there's no false cutting edge, so it doesn't really hamper the blade. We've got a plastic moulded handle, and overall it's a good robust knife. Better still, with this type of knife for a beginner, you can learn to use the knife, you can learn to sharpen the knife with no risk of heartache if we damage the tool. You could buy 10 of these knives for the price of one of the more expensive handmade knives. So overall, for the basic bushcrafter, for the beginner in particular, this is a fantastic type of knife to carry. Equally as important as the knife is the sheath it comes in. And here's two examples. One's leather, one's ABS or moulded plastic. Both have their advantages, both have their disadvantages. The leather sheath, for example, is aesthetically pleasing. It creates an overall look and feel for the knife, which, as I mentioned earlier, if you're comfortable with the knife, if you like to carry the knife and use the knife, you're going to gain experience. It's more traditional also, and in cold climates, leather's the thing to go for. It doesn't freeze, it's not going to crack so easily, it's a more robust material. The other type of sheath is a plastic sheath. Now this type of sheath has many advantages in as much as it's tough, it's virtually unbreakable. If we're using a knife for game prep or the sheath itself becomes contaminated with anything, dirt or blood or whatever, we can just simply wash it in hot soapy water and clean it, making it much more hygienically sound. This type of knife, as I've mentioned before, for the beginner is ideal, and this is the type of knife I would recommend to anybody. So guys, those are the types of knife which are now typical as the Bushcraft knife. They're a single bevel, carbon steel cutting tool with a non-absorbent handle of a medium size, say 4 inches, that comes with either a leather or a plastic type of sheath. And if you go for either, you can't go wrong. However, my preference for cutting tool is slightly different, and over time and experience I've learnt to appreciate this type of knife. This is the full Niven F1, and we'll talk about that now. The Full Niven F1 is slightly different to most common bushcraft knives in as much as it has what we call a convex blade. There's no single bevel, there's no double bevel. The blade gently curves to the cutting edge. And this, to my mind, is more typical of a traditional type of knife. I remember a long time ago seeing a program about headhunters in Indonesia or somewhere along those lines, and they were sharpening their machetes on a sharpening stone which was bowed from years and years of usage. And as soon as I saw them sharpening their knives on that tool, I realised that the actual edge they were going to create on their knife would be bowed. This got me thinking, so I experimented, looked at different types of cutting tools, cutting edges, and found that the full Niven range with their convex edge are absolutely fantastic. The knife itself, as we described in all the other knives, comes with a rubberized grippy handle. It's got a full tang which goes through all the way to the butt, allowing the little protruding section of metal there to be used as a hammer for crushing seeds or fibres. The blade itself is the size of my palm, and the handle itself is obviously the size of my hand. It's a good size overall for general bushcrafting use, and this is the knife I prefer to use. Another feature in this knife that I like is the sheath. Again, it has a Z-tail sheath, which means that if I get the sheath contaminated with blood or guts or anything like that, I can clean it easily. So overall, this is my preference as a cutting tool for general usage in most areas when I'm doing bushcraft. So, using the information already provided, we've now selected our knife, and in this instance I've selected the Mora Knife. As important as knife selection is how we use the cutting tool, and that's what we're going to look at now. Firstly, when we draw the knife from the sheath, especially if we're using a leather sheath where there's a stitched edge, it's always important to remember to grasp the sheath along the spine, along the back of the sheath, so that when we draw the knife there's no risk of the actual edge cutting through the leather and cutting our fingers. And believe it or not, I've seen this done on a few courses. So to draw my knife, I grasp the sheath along the back and pull the blade free. Okay? There's no risk of the knife cutting the leather and cutting me. And that's an important consideration, especially if it's cold, it's dark, we're tired. A small injury can lead to a lot of trouble. Another thing to remember with the knife is, as your mother used to say, whenever you pass a knife, you always pass it by the handle. But we don't pass the knife like that or in any other way. When we pass the knife, we take it in a normal grip and we simply flick the handle up and pass it to the person we're passing it to. We make sure that we make eye contact with the person we're passing it to, so if they snatch the knife away or they aren't paying attention, we can at least control the situation. And you'll notice that the cutting edge is away from my hand, so there's no risk of me ever damaging myself. When we come to use the knife then, there's several different types of grips we can use. The first grip or grasp is the positive or punch grip. This is the most common type of grasp for using in a powerful motion, especially when we're pushing down or bearing down on the knife. Okay, we grasp the knife in our wrist or in our hand with our wrist at 90 degrees to the blade, and this allows us to do quite positive, quite strong cuts. We can reverse the blade, again in the reverse of the positive grip, and we can use this in one of two ways. We can use this in what we call the chest lever grip, which allows us to use our stronger muscles in our upper torso to produce nice deep cuts into the piece of wood, like so. And as you can see there, I can take a lot of wood off in a very little time using that technique. Or we can use the knife, again in the reverse technique, carving towards ourselves for fine work, say sharpening a pencil. Obviously that requires us to have a little bit more control and be more aware of what's going on around us. Okay? You'll notice that when I'm carving, I'm sitting down with my knees raised and my elbows are resting on my knees. This ensures that the cutting edge never goes near either of my femoral arteries. Okay? You cut your femoral artery, especially when you're carving your woods on your own like I am now, then it's game over. Okay? So we never carve in any way where we're going to risk cutting our femoral artery. And as I say, with this type of technique, if I'm carving like that, there's very little risk of the knife actually sliding up and hitting me, because I've got control, and if I do slip, the meaty part of my thumb will hit my body before the cutting edge does. Okay? The only danger really there is if I've got a pencil or something hard in my pocket, the blade hitting that could cut the material. The other thing to be aware of as well is when I'm doing this, my arm is out of the way. So I'm limiting the risk of any further damage to myself should I slip, and that's an important consideration. When you're carving, think to yourself every time, what happens if I slip? What if I slip? Most people who cut themselves on courses, and some of the courses I've run we've had quite bad injuries, the people have always said to me, I knew I was going to do that. And that's the difference. If you think about it before you do it, you won't do it. If you do it and think to yourself, oh, this is dodgy, this is dangerous, I could slip, and do it, pound to a pinch of poo, you will slip, and that's when you injure yourself. Okay, so we've got the positive grip, we've got the reverse grip, which we can use in a chicken lever grip. There are other grips we can use. We can use the knife in a reverse grip where our hand is slightly onto the blade, like so, and we can use that again for fine work, such as taking the bark off a blade. Yeah, we can use the knife in a manner like so, where we've got two fingers holding the handle, two fingers free and a thumb free, and we can use this for levering and for splitting. The idea there is once the split starts, the knife runs into the wood, the fingers and thumb stop the knife sliding down and hitting this hand. Okay, so these are the most common types of grip we're going to use when we're using a knife. Now when we come on to doing the carving video, we'll show you other types of grips and the other ways of using the knife. But for now, for basic technique, punch grip, reverse grip, chicken lever grip, and what I can call the brake grip are the ideal grips. They're the most common grips we're going to use for most things. Okay? Now when we come on to cuts, one other thing we need to consider with a cut is it's very easy to use the knife just to strip bark off the wood. Okay? One thing we need to consider, if we're not sharpening and making a point, and we need to control our cut, is to put in a thing called a stop cut. And a stop cut, again, we'll come on to this when we go into the carving video, we merely take the knife across the grain of the wood and work it in. Then using any of the techniques we've described, in this case I'll just use a slightly controlled thumb pressure on a positive grip. We can use the cut to take out a nice controlled section of wood. Okay? And that's a handy technique to know, especially when we come to making traps and stuff like that. But again, most of the cutting techniques we'll cover when we come onto the video for carving later on. I guess you're